Welcome back to the Fantasy Trash Talk channel. We're going to be doing an auction mock draft and showing you two different strategies. Strategy number one is a punt points build. It's going to be based around one of my favorite players, Nikola Jokic. Strategy number two is going to be a centerless build. What is centerless, Jake, as I am bidding $73 on Nikola Jokic?
It's a lot of Nikola Jokic. The centerless build is literally you build your team without a center. You're punting rebounds, blocks, and field goal percentage, which is obviously the three best categories for centers. So you're punting those categories, and you're not even drafting a center at all on your team. You're just using that roster slot for another player and hoping that you're not at a big disadvantage in games played.
Now, guys, we're going to be talking through both strategies at the same time. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I have bid $73 for Nikola Jokic. I will not tell you what the max price I'm prepared to go up to Nikola Jokic is, but I will start to tell you guys the secrets of a punt points build. There are several variations of it. The one that I prefer to do, especially if I'm playing an auction, is punting points, threes, and free throw percentage. When you do this, it is absurd the type of value that you can gain in auction. One of the reasons why this build is so strong in auction is because there are more than 12 players that fit the build, and they are all super cost effective, meaning you can bid $68 on Nikola Jokic and still get all the players that you want. You can bid $73 on Nikola Jokic, and you're going to see that I'm able to get all the players that I want. You can do this build without Joker, but because of how cash light this build is, my favorite variations of it have all had Nikola Jokic. Also, we're getting so many assists out of the center position, it puts less pressure on us to get guards later. Who are you targeting with your first few picks trying to go centerless, Jake?
Yeah, so the centerless build really, the first turning point there is how much Halliburton goes for. He's probably the most important player in the centerless build because you're trying to balance getting enough points and assists while also being good in turnovers, and it's a really, really hard balance. And against some teams, it's going to be impossible. You were not going to be able to win all three, but there will be some matchups where you can if you play it right. So Halliburton is kind of the first sliding doors type of player. See how much he goes for. I've found that 60 is kind of the maximum that you can pay for him, but if you do it right, you can probably pay more. And I haven't seen him going for much more than that anyway.
Yeah, I think that it depends on what build you're in. I am comfortable if I'm playing in the pump points variant, going all the way up to like 62, 63 for Halliburton. I think that there's a couple different ways that you can still build the rest of it. It seems like there's like 6 or 7 players in centerless, and you need to get about 4 of them. Does that seem right to you?
Well, we can go through them. There's different levels of player that you need to get in centerless. So there's your top tier guys like Halliburton, Fred VanVleet, Donovan Mitchell. There are a few more, and then later on, there's a bunch of guys. That's actually what makes this build so powerful. Is that if you look down the list at guys rated from about 70 to 100 in ADP, there are 10 or so of those guys who are all monsters in this build and go for really cheap. So that's why I think this build is so strong, and you don't even have to get all of them. You get 2 or 3 of them. Guys like Terry Rozier, Anthony Simons, Marcus Smart. There's so many guys later on that so that's what I think is the strength of this build for real.
Let's drop a little bit of wisdom on you guys. We're not going to make a ton of auction videos, but we are going to give you a ton of auction advice in this video. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the channel. We're getting ready for real draft season, guys. Like within the next 8 or 9 days, we're going to have our first real early draft. We're going to be doing them the first week of October as well. As soon as we get done with our real cash leagues, $250, $500, $1,000 buy-ins, those videos are going to get posted on the channel. You do not want to miss that. One of the big things when you're doing a punt, whether it's auction or whether let me just go ahead and bid, Jaren Jackson Jr. up so that we're not wasting a bunch of time. Other people can get him, but they're not going to get him for $25. Let's just go ahead and accelerate that. One of the things that you have to make sure that you're doing when you are punting, especially if you're punting free throw percentage or field goal percentage, You want to make sure that you don't over concentrate categories. Over concentrate categories. That means you don't end up first with an average of 58% field goal. That's not useful. You've wasted money if you're playing auction. You've wasted draft picks if you're playing snake. If you're playing punt field goal percentage, you don't want to end up first in 3 points made and first in free throw percentage by a crazy margin. You want to balance that out. Make sure you're getting more points. Make sure you're getting more steals. Make sure you're getting more assists.
Our guy Rain, who I think we can call him the godfather of the centerless build,
Sure.
he 100% disagrees with you, and he thinks that you actually do need to over concentrate in that build because of the variance in those categories. Because you're getting high 3-point volume players who might average three threes a game, but they might have a week where they miss everything, and that's going to affect their points. It's going to affect their threes. Going to field goal doesn't matter, but so he tries to get really high standard scores, Z scores for all of those categories, or as many as he can. And in the centerless build, there is no such thing as over concentrating. You're really going for as much as you can in those 6 categories.
Yeah, I will clarify here. I am speaking more towards punt points. Like, if I was going to say I was a quote unquote expert on a build, I would say that I've really focused on, oh my God, 50 for SGA because we were talking. That is, who got him for, oh, Ben. Oh, that hurts my heart. That's way too cheap for SGA. Well done,
Well,
Ben.
something in these videos, which is probably not going to happen in actual drafts, is I'm trying to build a team a certain way, and I don't want to be caught with somebody, even if it's a good price. I don't want to be caught with SGA for 51 because it just doesn't work for the video. In a real draft, I would absolutely have put him up there.
I mean, SGA isn't that bad, is he? In punt field goal percentage? What's your triple punt and centerless?
Field goal, rebounds, and blocks. And so he's pretty good still because of all the points and the free throw percentage that he gets, but he's not a good 3-point shooter. And that's really the issue. He's not a good 3-point shooter, but he's pretty good
I mean,
otherwise.
he's still fourth best player in that triple punt. Pretty solid guy. Now, LaMelo Ball is definitely one of the players that fits into this build, right?
Yeah, he's definitely one of them. This year, he'll probably a top 10 player in the build. But if you're trying to find that narrow area where you can win assists and turnovers, I don't think that you can do it with him as your best player. You need to do it with Halliburton. So I'm going to try that for this video just to see how it goes. And there are definitely other ways to do this build, but we're going to try it with Halliburton today.
So since we spent $73 on Joker, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to fill up my queue with the players that I like for this build. Now, obviously, you guys are watching at home. You see my T-shirt. Let's take a second here and just focus on the swag. This is not
Nobody
merch. We
sees
are
that
not
T-shirt.
selling. Yeah, here you go. This T-shirt right here.
Can't see it.
Clax Facts, and it even has Joel Embiid on the ground as Nick Claxton dunks on him. And so we go ahead and we put Nick Claxton in the queue. Now, you would never nominate Claxton early. In fact, I like to nominate the centers that are behind him, like a DeAndre Ayton, like a Rudy Gobert, get them out so that people bid them up and they are going, oh, I already have 2 centers. I don't need to bid on Claxton. Last year, I don't know if you're an expert in the pump points build, but what do you think Claxton was last year if you punted points, threes, and free throw percentage? What do you think his rank was?
Probably top 5.
He was the number 1 player.
Number 1. Wow.
If you punted points, free throw percentage, and threes. And I think he's poised to have an even better year this year than he did last year. So Nick Claxton is a big piece. He might be the most important piece in this build in terms of dollars to talent. He's the only guy that you can get that is going to play like a top 5 player in categories that you need. Now, one of the things that is true for this build, if you look at the top 12, you're going to see names like Rudy Gobert, Jarrett Allen, Clint Capella, Walker Kessler, Mitchell Robinson. There's a lot of guys that get a ton of blocks and crazy high field goal percentage that populate the top 12. What separates Clax from this is his potential to get steals, assists, and not turn the ball over. And when you are trying to build toast, which this build tries to do, you'll see that Clax has a little more value in different variations than a Walker Kessler or a Rudy Gobert. And we'll maybe towards the end of the video, we'll dial deep into what the differences mean in your big men. You tend to over concentrate field goal percentage. So, like, for example, if I take field goal percentage out and I go to a quad punt, Nicholas Claxton is now still the second best player in that quad punt. But Walker Kessler, he had so much value in field goal percentage, he's now fallen from 5th to 8th. Every other big man basically drops down when you add that. And you're going, well, why would I punt field goal percentage as well? When you do this build, and you're not shooting threes, you tend to have a really high field goal percentage. Like your team field goal percentage might be 53, 54% naturally. And if you try to get all the guys that are good in your build, you might end up with a 57, 58% field goal percentage. You just don't need all that. So balancing it out a little bit is important. We're going to really focus on steals. We're going to try to be a top 2 team in blocks. We can always stream blocks if we need to against one of the big man teams that might match up well against us. But we're going to go for value. We're going to go for high assist to turnover ratio. And we're going to make sure that we get steals. All right, Halliburton is on the clock. What is the price that you feel comfortable going up to? And obviously I won't bid against you because that's insider info.
Yeah, just like I didn't bid on Jokic. The number I have in my head right now is 60. We'll see what I can get him for here. I think for the video, I'm just willing to go probably 62 or 63, maybe even 65, kind of whatever it takes just to make this work. But
one thing that's interesting about auction guys, and you might really want to make sure that you are drafting in browser and not on your phone app. Whoa.
He went for 48. Right, this build is going to be much easier.
Wow. Okay. Well, Jake is off to a strong start. Probably going to snap up Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, here we go. So Fred VanVleet is another really important player in this build. Historically, at least the last like 3 or 4 years, he's been incredible for this build. I'm not 100% certain that's going to be true this year in Houston. He's under a different coach in a different system with different players, so we'll see. But for now, I'm going to go after him and probably cap it out at 34 here if somebody bids me up. Yeah, so I'm going to let him go at 35, even though I got Halliburton cheap. I think his lack of points hurts you in this build more than you would think, even though he's like a top 5 player in the punt. So I'm going to let him go for 35. I think that's just crazy that I got Halliburton for 48, and I'm going to be able to get a lot more scoring around him than I anticipated. So I'll let VanVleet go at 35.
Yeah, that's a really good turn of events for you. Crazy good turn of events for you.
Doesn't seem realistic, honestly, but we'll go with it.
I think it could happen.
Yeah, so Trae Young is the 9th best player around there in this build. I think he's been going for pretty solid value in drafts, like around 30 to 32 is what I'm seeing. So 32 feels like a good number for me. I think I'll bid him up one more time here, and pairing Halliburton with Trae Young, it gets me a ton of points, a ton of free throw percentage, really good threes, and a lot of assists next to Halliburton. I'm getting bid up here, so I think I'm just gonna. This is tough. I'm gonna go one more 37.
Stay with it. Yeah, you got to stay. I think you got to stay in it.
Stay in it at 38. There are other players who I'd rather have for that price.
I mean, one of the things I know Rain has said, and I also agree with it, is in this build, in the centerless build, you have to overpay a little for your first few guys to get the value later.
Okay, that makes sense.
So with those guys off, which targets are you really going after now? Donovan Mitchell, I'm assuming.
Donovan Mitchell, somebody who I think fits this build really well, who might not seem like he would, is Mikal Bridges, because he's small forward eligible and he doesn't really turn the ball over. So he's going to get you a lot of points with good free throw threes and steals, and he's not going to turn the ball over that much. And something that I didn't mention yet, which is really important for this build, is eligibility. There aren't very many guys who are power forward eligible and even small forward eligible who fit this build. So making sure you get like 2 guys who can play power forward plus another 2 guys who can play small forward is really important, because you're already behind positionally by not having a center. You don't want to fall further behind, because then you really just don't have a chance.
Yeah. Positional eligibility is going to be a big deal in both of these builds. When you are playing punt points, it's way too easy to end up having too many centers. You end up having 5 or 6 or 7 centers on your team if you're not careful. And you just simply can't play that many centers. You cannot get them in the game. So getting the rare players that fit what you're doing, that have shooting guard, small forward eligibility, is crucial. These are guys for my build, like Jimmy Butler with that small forward eligibility. Josh Giddey is super interesting because he has shooting guard, small forward, and power forward eligibility. It's a massive help. Herb Jones is a player that has small forward and power forward eligibility, and Josh Hart is a player that has shooting guard and small forward eligibility. Josh Hart is sneaky valuable in so many builds. He's definitely somebody that everybody has been going after, whether you're in punt points, whether you're in punt threes. Now, I am in a
This is
quandary here. I think we would go after Jimmy Butler a lot of
yeah.
times here. I'm going to let you have him. There's other paths that I have here that don't require him, but he is good and he is necessary in this build.
Well, the thing about Jimmy Butler, we've talked about him a lot. He's incredible in every single build. You can play around with the numbers yourself if you're watching this video, but like even if you're punting steals, somehow he's really good in that build.
I
No,
want to show you
you're
guys
good.
something, okay? Look at my queue, okay? I have over 20 players in my queue right now, and these are players that fit really well together in your combinations for pump points. Remember, you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of guards. Why is a player like Dennis Schroeder in there? Why is a player like Spencer Dinwiddie in there? When you are getting late in the draft, you want to focus on assists to turnover ratio and steals. Usually, if you've gotten the players that you should be focusing on, your field goal percentage will be so high that you can add a few guards that have poor field goal percentage and you'll still comfortably be the number one team. So it's less about the individual players and more about the sum of their parts. But look at this, and this is a big strength for the punt points build. As I look at all these players, I can let a Jimmy Butler go because I have backup options. I'm not
Yeah.
relying on one player. I can only have 13 players on my roster in this mock draft. I have twice that that's available and out there to help me. Now, I will be drafting and nominating players that I don't want earlier in the draft. So I do not want Sengun. I'm going to be nominating him with my next nomination. You'll also see me nominate a few other bigs like Zion, Kristaps Porzingis, Jared Allen. These are bigs that I might normally like, but for the punt that I'm going for, I don't like their price to value ratio.
Yeah, and I think that's generally a pretty widely accepted concept in auction drafts. You nominate guys who you don't want and hope people pay massive amounts for them. I nominated Anthony Davis for the same reason. So going to my team here. So I have Halliburton, Kyrie, and Jimmy Butler. Even with Kyrie, who I imagine could probably average 25 or so per game this year, maybe a little bit less, I'm a little low on points because of the amount of money I spent on these 3 top players. The players who are going for that amount of money score more points than these guys. So I'm at a disadvantage there. So that's something that I'm going to have to focus on for the entire draft. However, just going by last year's rankings, Halliburton was the second best player in this build. Kyrie was the 7th best player, and Jimmy Butler was the 9th best player. So I already have 3 of the top 9 players. I do have Donovan Mitchell as somebody I'm targeting as my last big spend to get those points. We'll see if that happens. And then beyond that, we're just going to have to target points throughout the draft.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You do gain later. There are players like a Jalen Green, a Dylan Brooks, Colin Sexton. There's players that put up relatively empty stats that score a lot that you will be able to get in later rounds that there really be a shot in your arm. Klay Thompson.
Yeah,
Klay Thompson. I don't have the number memorized, but he plays like a top 20 player in your build.
I can look that up. He's number 30, but let's call him 28 because Shaq Harrison and Skylar Mays were ahead of him. They really mess up these rankings.
In the triple pun, he's only top 30.
He's number 30. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. would have thought he was a little higher.
Well, he doesn't really get defensive stats. Doesn't get the
Yeah, that
steals.
makes sense.
But when you have Halliburton and Jimmy Butler and even Kyrie Irving, Kyrie averaged 1.1 steals last year. And there are a few guys later on, like Herb Jones, uh, a few others, Matisse Thybulle maybe, who are such steal specialists that I can afford to get somebody like Klay Thompson who doesn't get steals and still be absolutely dominant in that category.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk through my queue for a little bit and some of the longer players that I want to target. We already talked about Nick Claxton. I'm wearing the Clax Attack shirt. We talked about Josh Giddey. Talk about Tyus Jones. His price has been rising, but his assist to turnover and his steals ratio are something that we really like. Jalen Williams has the potential to be the number one stocks player, defensive categories, and I've been seeing him go for like 14 to 18, and you will have the money, and he has that coveted shooting guard, small forward eligibility. Gafford is fine if you get him super cheap, but he falls into this grouping along with like Capella, um, Anye, less Draymond, more Mitch Robinson. There's a lot of centers that you can get that are really good in this build. And I don't care which draft it is, I'm always seeing one or two of them go too cheap. So, like, get them if you get them at the price you like, but don't feel like you need to collect them all. If you get 3 or 4 of the, like, crucial centers in this build, and you already have a guy like Joker and you have a guy like Nick Claxton, you're gonna match up well against anyone. Because there isn't going to be a team, like a Giannis team, for example, that gets 4 more centers and can beat you in big man cats. They're not going to be able to score points against anyone else. That's just a shitty, soft points punt where they're soft punting it and they slightly well match up with you, but they're never going to make the playoffs with Giannis leading a punt points team. So you don't really have to worry about it. If you get 3 of these bigs, if you get 3 of Claxton, Walker Kessler, Gafford, Capella, Podol, Mitch Robinson. I think I just named 7. Jared Allen, you could throw him in there.
Yeah.
If you get 3 of those, you're good to go. And then throw one more like Gafford or Anye level guy that like has a lot of upside, or Kevon Looney. Time Lord, I didn't even mention Time Lord. He's going for peanuts. There's just too many centers for you to overpay for anyone. Now, I'm going to talk about a guy that I've talked about before. But
Wait, Josh, before you get into
matters.
that, just real quick, because we're talking about positional eligibility as important in both of our builds.
Sure.
Daniel Gafford is power forward eligible, which
Yeah.
I think makes him a little more valuable in your build than some of those other guys, just because of that. Because, like you said, if you're taking 3 or 4 of those centers and you already have Jokic and you already have Nick Claxton, you're running into a positional crunch as well. So having somebody who can play power forward is really valuable.
Yeah, I agree with that. As we put a $30 bid in on DeJounte Murray, we're very happy to get Murray for this price, but we're also comfortable letting him walk if someone wants to bid more. That's fine. Someone came and bid more. I'm going to talk about Ben Simmons for a second. Guys, last year was an absolute disaster for Ben Simmons. It could not have gone worse. In the triple punt, he was the 28th best player. I'm going to say that again. In the triple punt of points, threes, and free throw percentage, in a disaster year, a year with limited minutes and injuries, Ben Simmons was a top 30 player. But more importantly than that, he has point guard, shooting guard, power forward eligibility. You can't have an A plus or an A draft going into a pump points build and not get Ben Simmons. You have to get him, because if he is able to play in any capacity, he's going to be a top 5, top 10 guard. And you're going to get him under $5 in auction. You're going to get him in the 11th or 12th round in Snake. I think Ben Simmons has to be on your roster at the end of the day, so save a spot for him. Donovan Mitchell is up at $39. How do you feel about that, Jake?
Yeah, he's somebody who I would target here if I didn't get Kyrie for 46, but at 39 or 40, that seems pretty reasonable for him just generally. But I'm down to $72 left. I probably have one more big like $25 to $30 spending in me. So I think 39 is a little bit too much. I'd rather go after somebody like Jalen Brunson or Jamal Murray for a little bit less, so that I can assure myself that I get my guys like Terry Rozier and one of the Jones brothers and those big assist to turnover ratio guys.
Let's talk about roster shapes for a second, okay? So I'm going for the Sun build where you have one giant star and everything orbits around it. I'm going to have Nikola Jokic for somewhere between like 68 and however many dollars I'm willing to spend for him. I'll never tell you. And then I'm going to have 4 to 5 players that are going to be in that 15 to 20, $25 range. And then I'm going to round out with super cheapies. So the core of my team is going to look like 5 to 6 players, with one player being worth like 2.5 to 3 players, and that's Nikola Jokic. What shape of a roster are you looking for when you do the center list? Are you looking for a big 4? Are you looking for a big 5? Are you comfortable with like 3 stars and then depth? Like, is it more of a stars and scrub, or is it well rounded? How would you describe it?
Well, it depends what you mean by scrub, because there are some players who I'm getting later on, like a Gary Trent, who's going pick 120 ish, but last year he was the 17th best player in this build. So I don't know if that would make him a scrub or not. It's a scrub for most
Not at
teams,
all.
but not for
Yeah.
this one. So I, but just like generally speaking for this build, I think 4 big gun type of players is kind of what I'm going for, especially if you can get Halliburton for 48, you can afford 4 guys. So I think 4 is the number. There might be some drafts where you skip on Halliburton and go after like 5 little bit cheaper guys, like a Jalen Brunson and a Jamal Murray instead of Halliburton, something like that. But yeah, I think 4. So what shape would you call that with like 4 guys at the top?
Um, I think it's still star centric, but I for me I think stars and scrubs I usually feel like that's like a top 3 or like a top 2. I think at 4, especially if you've got a really clear direction of your punt, you brought up a great point with Gary Trent Jr. We talked about Clay earlier. In the right punt, there's going to be these guys that should be scrubs that are going to play like stars in your build. And I'm going to nominate Zion here because, and here's a little like bonus fact about Zion, maybe also Morant, Morant. Um, Zion's going to fit with your Giannis owner. Zion's going to fit with a more traditional punt free throw percentage team, like a team that also wants De'Aaron Fox. But he's going to take money and he's going to take forward and center eligibility roster slots off of the guy that you're probably most bidding against. So I really, really like to see Zion get out there before Nick Claxton gets out there. In an ideal world, my competitor, the guy who has Giannis, and let's look at this, okay? The Giannis owner has Cade, LeBron, and look at that, guys. I didn't even look, and look at what happened.
Yep.
The Zion owner is owned by the Giannis owner, and the Zion Giannis owner, Steve, who is a human player, he now has $75 left, and he's only bid on 4 players. Now, is Steve going to fight me to the death over Nick Claxton? I don't think so, unless he's a subscriber of this channel. But honestly, in a non-punt points build, Nick Claxton is not the savior, right? He's good. He's great. He's going to play like a second rounder, at least, if not better. But when you're not punting points, no one's going to lose the farm over Nick Claxton. So by nominating the players we've nominated, a lot of positional spots and a lot of money is off. Now, every draft is going to be different. Is there another guy that looks like he might be punting free throw? Let's look at the Luka owner. Not really. Going Jason Tatum, Jaren Jackson. I like that Jaren Jackson price. It looks like we might only have one team competing against us in punt free throw.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah, I don't see another guy that's concentrating early. Like the Sabonis owner can sometimes punt free throw, and the Luka owner can sometimes punt free throw, but it doesn't look like either one of them intend to.
No, I think it's just you and the Giannis team. And looking through this also, because in some drafts you'll have guys who are trying the same punt and field goal build, but I'm not seeing that here either. Maybe Tweety over here, but he drafted Shingun, so that kind of messes with that. I think I'm the only one.
Let's do you have your queue filled up? Let's talk about your queue if you have it filled up.
Yeah, so I got my queue with, I don't know, like 15 players here. So Jalen Brunson is one of those guys. But the unfortunate thing about this draft right now is that we have for auto drafters, but they don't have that much money left, so it shouldn't affect things a lot going forward. But Jalen Brunson for 33 is probably a little too high for my liking. I know we try not to look at the projected number and the average number, but that's well above what he's going for in most drafts. He was the top guy in my queue. The next guy I have is Jamal Murray. Drew Holiday is also on my queue, but here we go with the auto drafters messing with us here. Drew Holiday is going to go for too much. Jamal Murray, I do have Josh Giddey also on my queue, but I don't think he's a great fit because he's not a high scorer. It's just that he's power forward eligible, which is why I like him. I also have Zach LaVine, Tyrese Maxey, Franz Wagner, Terry Rozier, Tyus Jones. I got a really long list here. I could go through it. Bradley Beal. So, like I said, I'm looking for scoring, and I'm also looking for with scoring. Usually, you're going to get threes and free throw percentage. So that's generally like a pretty highly correlated. So that's why I'm going for Jamal Murray here for $26. I think that's pretty awesome. He was I don't know. He's had such good playoff runs the last two times he was in the playoffs, but he hasn't really put it together in the regular season. But I think there's a chance that he does this year and he ends up as a top 30 player without a punt, and that would make him really valuable in my punt here. Last year he was, even with a down year, he was the 28th best player. So yeah, I really like that for $26.
Yeah, and it secures some of the scoring that you're looking for, and you've still got a decent amount of money left to get some of these guys like Clay, Gary Trent Jr., etc. Um, to round out your roster with guys that gain a ton of value. And, this will be true in both builds that we're doing. You might have to pay a little more than you want for guys in the middle, but where you win with these punts is usually not with your first, second, third rounders. Where you win with these punts is in the late rounds.
Yeah, that's why my queue is all the way down to somebody like Emmanuel Quickly, Keegan Murray, those guys late in the draft you can get for $1 to $3 who play like $15 to $20 players. He's
And
somebody who
Markel
you like in your
Fultz,
build.
yeah, Markel Fultz is a guy that I like at $13. I'm comfortable letting him go. I think that
Yeah,
he could easily return that in this punt. Last year in this build, which was a down year for Markel Fultz or a recovery year, he was 53, which is good, but not good enough for me to justify that price when you're going to see that I'm able to get 2 or 3 players for $13 later in this draft that are all going to be top 50 players.
OG is somebody I really like in this build. And the big reason for that is because he's going to get a lot of steals and he shoots threes and is a good free throw percentage guy. But, there we go. I feel comfortable letting him go for 23. Now he's going up to 26. I found that in this build, I end up over-concentrating threes with, like I said earlier, I over-concentrate steals with Halliburton, Jimmy Butler. Kyrie's good at that. Guards tend to be, even guards who aren't good at steals, tend to be getting like 0.7 to 1, which is much better than most bigs. So it just makes it really easy to be good in steals, and it means that I don't really need to target OG that hard.
Be interested to see if the Giannis owner goes after Fox. They normally pair Fox and Giannis a lot.
I think that's a really good combo.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Let's him
interested.
go.
Okay,
And
so if I had to guess of all the players that are left, and we'll see if I'm right, I think Mobley is the one who's going to go for the most money. Maybe Walker Kessler. But let's see. I'm going to nominate Mobley.
Tweety with an interest in Mobley. Tweety has an Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, Sengun, Simons team going for extreme youth.
Young and upside. I like it. That's fun. It's always a fun team to have. You get to root for the young and the upside.
If you get one breakout player, it could pay for itself. But if you're constantly having to buy into the idea that all of your players are going to improve, and most of these guys, they have improvement baked into their price. You're not getting them at last year's performance. LaMelo Ball might be the only exception to that, who you're getting cheaper than he was last year.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, with all these guys, especially with the price he paid.
Yeah. DeMar DeRozan going for 20. There's several builds, like a punt block, punt free build that DeRozan is a top 12 player. I love his price. He's kind of like a slightly older veteran version of Nick Claxton. and that you're getting him in that $18-$22 range, but he plays like the top first rounder. Now, obviously, Claxton's ceiling is a little higher and he's a little younger, but it's still, DeRozan is a great Swiss Army knife for a lot of punts.
Yep, I'm a big fan of DeRozan this year. I think if you can get him for 20 in any draft, you're getting a pretty good deal there.
Jordan Poole. I've seen some pretty high draft prices for Poole.
Yeah, and he fits my build really well. Even last year, when he wasn't very good, he was the 65th best player in this build, and he was much better the year before. And now he's going to be playing a lot more minutes, I would presume, and have the ball in his hands even more than that. So I'm going to let him go at this price, but I think there's a chance that he returns this value, especially in the punt field goal.
So what targets are you looking at with your $46 that you have remaining?
So unfortunately, we're both going to be targeting Tyus Jones. We'll see how that ends up. He's one of my big guys. Franz Wagner, I think, is somebody I really like in this build because of the power forward eligibility and just the overall production without turning the ball over too much. And then the guys who we've talked about a lot already, Terry Rozier. I like Devin Vassell, Bradley Beal, Trey Jones, the brother of Tyus Jones, who I think has a chance to actually be better than Tyus Jones this year, but we'll see. There's Tobias Harris, Marcus Smart, and with my $46 left, I in auction drafts I tend to kind of pencil in that I'm going to get two $1 guys later on. So in my head, I really have $44 left and 7 roster spots to fill with two $1 roster spots, which makes it feel a little bit better to spend some more money on guys. But I still have to be pretty judicious with how I spend my money going forward. Josh, who's your next target here? Because you only have one player.
Yeah, I was just about to talk about that. It's funny doing the pump points build because I always jump out and I get Nikola Jokic early, but then I might not make another move for an hour. And I just sit here and I look at the teams that are being formed. I make sure I memorize who my opponents are so I know Steve is my punt free throw competitor. Now, Chris Paul is a guy that we like, but a bot jumps in and bids 20 for him. I think the true Chris Paul price is somewhere between $8 and $11, $8 and $12 when it's all humans. Chris Paul was a player that was in our queue. His assist to turnover ratio is incredible. I think that will continue on the Golden State Warriors, a team with one of the most sophisticated offenses and a lot of spacing. And Chris Paul is one of the smartest players in the NBA. But again, guys, not to point out the strength of this build, I still have well over 20 players in my queue. It's like, I think a screen is 18 and I have 3 passes. There's 21 or 22 players in my queue right now. There's other players that are still very draftable in this build, but these are the ones that I would consider prizes, right? So as I sit here with $127, I have the most money by a fat margin. I think I have more money than any two teams put together. It's really close between, let's see, Steve and Lay. Okay, Steve and Lay together have a little more money than me.
Yeah.
But besides that, I have as much money as any two teams. You will notice when you do pump points that more teams are competing for the same players than you are competing with other teams. And it really helps in auction format. And Snake, I think it's harder to build a pump points build. It's still good to do it, but it's harder. Now, we like Claxton better than Walker Kessler, but for $13, we'll go Walker Kessler all day.
You can get both for that price.
You can definitely get both. We want to bid Walker up to at least $20. Again, we just want to hold the price so that the people that we're competing against later don't have too much free money. I'm going to bid one more time. We'll see if Tweety goes up to 20. But Walker, I think at 19, I'm fine with him. Yeah, perfect. This is literally perfect. And I've had a lot of people ask me, you know what's weird? I've probably seen this comment 4 or 5 times on Reddit and YouTube. People have said, Josh, why are you so high on Nick Claxton but not Walker Kessler? They're basically the same player. I'm going to give you a couple responses to that. Number one, the Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, who Nick Claxton plays on, they don't own their draft pick this year. They have no incentive to tank. They're going to try to win as many games as possible. The Utah Jazz are top 3 scariest teams to tank this year. Walker Kessler is a winning player. Nick Claxton is a winning player. Way more likely that Claxton plays every game, and here he is out there now. Way more likely that Claxton plays every game than Walker Kessler plays most of his games, in my opinion. Separate from that, I've already gone through some of the build variations with you guys, and I've shown you how if you look at 4 punts, if you look at 5 punts, Nick Claxton is a lot more valuable. And we see that we're bidding against Steve. Steve is the Giannis owner. We kind of already predicted that he would be our biggest competition. And here he is comfortably bidding 24, 26, 27. You gotta wonder if Steve is a subscriber.
He might be.
All right, at $30, we're gonna let Nick Claxton go. Guys, this is discipline. I'm literally wearing a shirt that says Nick Claxton on it.
I'm impressed.
I like Nick Claxton, but there's other options that we're going to be able to get. You're going to see these options in a second. Our roster is going to be built out, and Steve's basically not a competitor now because I explained this earlier, right? He just spent 30 on Nick Claxton. Let's take a look at Steve's field goal percentage. It's going to be comical. Steve is sitting on a 50 field goal percentage. He is the number 2 by a wide margin. We can ignore mine because I just have Joker. Mine's not real yet. But the odds of Steve over-concentrating on field goals seem pretty high to me based on the current auction prices. Now, the interesting thing is we like Claxton a lot better than we like Jared Allen. But would I rather have Jared Allen for like $13 or Claxton for 30?
I'll take Jared Allen.
Yeah, same.
Josh, I'm curious. So you still only have Jokic, and remember in fantasy,
Jared out. Oh wow, Lee's going up to 15. Yeah, just still have Jokic.
So in fantasy basketball, there are 9 categories, and you need to win at least 5 of them to win a playoff series. I don't know if you knew that. So how are you going to win 5 categories?
I'm going to dominate categories. Actually, I'm going to win 5 to 6 categories. Most weeks in this build, I'll win 6-3. I'm going to finish. I'll just tell you this right now. Like, I'm sitting here with 1 player, but I also have $127, and I'm very confident. I'm going to finish the number 1 field goal percentage team. I'm going to be the number 1 rebounding team. I'm going to be the number 1 blocks team. I'm going to be a very strong turnovers team. I'm going to be on the lower third of turnovers. I'm going to be a top 2 steals team. And I'm probably going to be the number 1 assist team. So that's how I'm going to win, just by absolutely hammer crushing in all of the categories that I care about and letting the categories that I don't care about just fly away.
I think Steve's just bidding up whoever you bid on now. Yeah, so
how good was Mark Williams in the triple punt last year? Not ranked. Wow. Oh,
he didn't play that much.
Sheet. I'm looking at the wrong sheet.
He was a rookie who was in and out of the rotation.
He was 40. He was 45. 45.
But we're assuming he's going to start this year, and if that's true, he's probably a top 30 player in your punt.
I agree. I still have about 22 options in my queue. And guys, I think this is the most disciplined early start. Like, I've never seen Claxton go 30 before. Let me start with that. Have you seen that? I've never seen that.
Not unless it was just like you and Rain having fun against each other.
I've never seen Claxton go 30. I don't think Rain and I have done that to each other. We've got trigger discipline here. Again, probably the most relaxing draft that I'm ever going to have is this pump points build, just because I can sit here, I can look at my queue, and I know that these guys are monsters. Guys that are still in my queue that are first rounders. Clint Capella, Mitchell Robinson. Is Rudy Gobert still out there? Yeah, Rudy Gobert is still out there. And he's a first rounder in my build. First rounder. Guys that played like second round. Jakob Poeltl, Steven Adams, Kevon Looney, Anye, right? And we already talked about Ben Simmons. So I'm sitting here, and most people are out of money, and I still have 4 guys that are first round, second round. 5 guys. So it's a relaxing build. Like if you understand this build, it's just not stressful. You're gonna have a strong team. Some days you'll get a stronger team than others. Like I've had some times where I got, Joker for 68 and then like Jimmy Butler for 32. And those drafts are just devastating. Those are just dominating drafts.
How much money do you think you're going to end up with at the end of this draft?
You mean left over?
Yeah.
I don't think I'll have any money left over. We'll see though. Well, it's possible because of how many computer players there were. And we'll do some more drafts, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll do some more drafts closer to when season starts as I get Josh Giddey for 17. Remember, most of Giddey's value for us is in that triple positional eligibility, which will be a big deal as we collect more and more centers, which we will start to do.
I grabbed Tyrese Maxey right before you grabbed Giddey for 11. Maxey last year was the 38th best player in this build, and I think he's a young player with some upside. So if he jumps up to the 30th best player in this build, then that's an incredible value for $11. Going for J-Dub, huh? All right, getting some players now.
Yeah, we're filling it
Two
out.
OKC players.
We got that positional eligibility. We got 2 shooting guards and 2 small forwards. And then we also got a lot of assists and a lot of steals. The blocks and the rebounds will come pretty easily later. And I'll say I paid $2-3 more for Giddey than I wanted. I don't think that's going to matter because of how little money is left. I think I'm just going to get all the guys that I want. So I'm going to loosely order my queue by how much I want these guys. So make sure that I get myself a Mitchell Robinson because I haven't gotten anyone yet. We have to get Ben Simmons. And we're looking at, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right there. Derek White is poised for a great year. He was surprisingly bad in our build outside the top 100. I think Josh Hart is a guy that you have to get every time. Now, the enemy of a pump points build is actually roster slots. So you'll be sitting here figuring out who you want, and you'll be going, oh my God, I don't have enough roster spots. That happens more times than you think.
Well, in that case, that it probably means you should spend a little bit more money earlier so that you don't have that issue. Because if you have too much money left and not enough guys to spend it on, you can afford to spend more money early on guys who fit your build and who might even be better.
Yeah, it was a weird situation with Claxton for sure.
Yeah, that definitely messed with the amount of money you have. So I've got $19 left for 7 players, which is I guess means I'm a stars and scrubs team, huh? If you were me here, so I've got Halliburton, who I think is going to lead the league in assists, but after that, my guys are all kind of from like the 4.5 to 6-ish assists per game range. If you were me, would you try to get one more guy who's going to average like 5 or 6 assists, or just kind of be okay with it and play out the rest of the draft as best as I can with guys who fit the build?
I think there's a lot of guys out there. Chris Middleton's still out there. CJ McCollum's still out there. Rozier's out there. Austin Reeves for the Lakers. A lot of guys out there that could still give you 4, maybe 5 assists. But also score
I don't leave $19.
Brooke Lopez goes for, what was that? $6 to lay. Very good price. Lay's been very disciplined as well. Good picks all around.
That's a downside to my build, the opposite of yours, where I've spent a lot of money really early in the draft, so I can't really afford to bid up somebody like Brooke Lopez.
Yeah, it is a disadvantage. I have the ability to play defense if I want. I've actually picked my roster. So, like, I know now pretty comfortably what my final roster is going to be. I'm going to get Jakob Poeltl, Rudy Gobert, Tyus Jones, Gafford, Mitch Robinson, Clint Capella, Ben Simmons, Josh Hart, Marcus Smart, and Anye. And that should almost exactly happen. I can't really see it not happening.
I predict you're going to end up with like $10 left, but we'll see.
It's possible for sure. And again, me having $10 left and demoing this build It's not exactly one-to-one. We're showing you guys the strategies. We're showing you guys the players. We're
Right.
showing you like what the final rosters. With humans, the prices would be a little different. Like Chris Paul would probably be going for $10 or $11, and I'd probably have him on my roster. But a computer player bid Chris Paul up, so it is what it is.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, I got Halliburton for 48. That's just not going to happen.
And now it's like an interesting question for Steve, right? So Steve bid $30 on Nick Claxton, which is just crazy. And now he's also bidding $50 or $15 on a Rudy Gobert. If he were to win, if I were to stop pumping right now and let him have Rudy, he's not going to be able to get enough stats. And he keeps going.
I would go one more. Yeah, let him take him for 21 if he really wants to.
He's really hurting himself, especially because players like Cade have such bad assist to turnover ratio. Like Cade, Giannis, and Zion also all turn the ball over. So he's a team that's like, where's his assists coming from? I'm looking at his team right now. All he has for assists are Cade and LeBron. There's no assists left. He has high turnovers. His scoring, okay, I guess he has 4 scorers, but I almost. There's another thing. Okay, guys, I'll talk about this. If things go absolutely crazy, I've done this a couple times. So I go in planning to pump points, and then there's 2 punt free throw teams. This is such an obscure thing, but if it happens to you, take the money and run. I go in wanting to pump points, but there's 2 punt free throw teams. And so there's guys bidding up every punt free throw player against each other. In that situation, you can see so many players overspending early that now I'm sitting here and I can buy up all of the Terry Rozier, CJ McCollum's, Franz Wagner, Jeremy Grant. Like you can get a bunch of guys in a row really cheap, and suddenly you're not a pump points team anymore. You went in planning to, but you're like, wait a minute, I've got the best player. These prices are too low. Why don't I just surround them with a ton of talent? And I've done that a couple times, and I don't hate it.
I actually like that idea for you now because of how much Claxton went for that you weren't able to get him. You got all this money left. You can get like 2 of them.
Yeah, I think I don't hate CJ here. I don't hate Terry Rozier. I really need to make sure I get the guards, though, of the more expensive ones that are left.
You need the Jones brothers.
At least one of them.
Do you ever go for both of them?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes for sure. My field goal
So Jalen
percentage
Green.
is high enough that I could afford Jalen Green, actually. It's pretty funny.
Jalen Green was not good in this build last year. He was the 89th best player, and that's because he wasn't a high assist guy. He didn't get steals, and he turned the ball over 2.5 times, and he wasn't even that great in free throws.
Come on, Steve. I know you're going to bid against me. What are you waiting for? Come on, Steve. Come on, Steve. Come on. Come on. All right, T. Come on. I know Steve wants to get in here. I will actually. Will I let Clint go here? Is I like better centers? Kind of almost want to let Clint go. How many centers do I have? I have 2 already. That would give me 5. Oh, I was trying to click. I'm okay with letting it go. Because I'm going to get Mitch Robinson, who's a center in total. That's going to give me 4.
Yeah,
and then
you probably don't need more than 4.
Anye would be 5, and I like Anye a lot.
You like him better than Capella? Capella's a starter.
Capella's got an injury history chronically, and I think that there's a lot of times that the Hawks are going to want to move off of him. So Anye was that good last year as the backup, and I think that he has even more upside.
Marcus Smart is somebody who was really good in my build also. He was the 57th best player. And
yeah, Smart
I just can't afford him anymore.
He should be explosively good for the beginning of the season, especially. And you got to wonder if Steve's realized, oh man, I'm not going to have enough assists. I wonder if that's sunk in yet for him.
I think I'm willing to pay 6 or 7 here for Rozier. He's so good in this build. You're bidding him up.
Yeah, I'm just acquiring talent. I got a lot of money. I'm sorry.
T can spend 13. Yeah, I just at this point I can't afford him for $9. However, he was the 26th best player in my build last year, by far the best player left available, other than Gary
And
Trent, who was
you let him go
17th.
for 8? You let him go
I
for
only
8?
have
I guess
I
you just
only have
don't have the money.
$19.
Yeah.
That's the problem with going for some of these guys. Although I'm really happy with all the value that I got in this draft, so I can't complain.
I'm at a point where with the amount of money that I have left, I can bully pretty much everybody, and I'm still going to get the guys that I want. And I'm just going to acquire like a couple extra talented players that I can always move later for trade pieces. Tyus Jones, let's see what happens. Now, I've seen Tyus go for 20
Yeah,
multiple times, but based on how much money's left, it's going to be basically impossible. I
I
assume,
just wasn't going to go over that. Can't.
Can't be
You're
upset sitting in my position.
you're the big stack right now.
Big stack, and we're acting like it. Now, you might ask
Yeah.
yourself, how good was Mitch Robinson in my build last year because he's coming up late? He was the fourth
Was he
best
fourth?
player.
Oh wow, look at
Fourth. And please don't let me get him for $2. Wow. Guys, you can see the strength of this build here. We're sitting here. We need 6 more roster slots. We've gotten pretty much everyone we've wanted except Nick Claxton. We wanted Nick Claxton. We got stuck, I guess, with Rudy Gobert, and we made the decision to let one center go, Clint Capella. I'm liking that more and more. Our enemy now is that we only have 6 roster spots left. So I think a lot of times here I would just be going absolute talent. Like I think Austin Reeves could have a fantastic year this year. I might even get a Michael Porter Jr. just for trade value. Let's go ahead and get Podol out of the way because we like Podol a lot. How much do we like Podol? He was the 13th best player in our build last year. And this is where the strength of the build comes in, right? Remember we were doing all that sitting and waiting when we just had Nikola Jokic? Like, guys, I know YouTube, the way YouTube works, most people won't be watching this late into the video. We are an hour into the video. With some editing, you guys are probably at the 35, 40-minute mark. But this is where the draft really kicks off for me, where I've just been sitting and lurking and waiting like a python. And now I'm getting a guy who's top 10, top 15.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
we got Mitch Robinson for $2. Add Mitch Robinson and Jakob Poeltl's price together. We got Mitch and we got Jakob Poeltl for a total of $15. That's half of what Steve played for Nick Claxton. And I love Nick Claxton, but I don't love him as much as Mitch Robinson plus Jakob Poeltl plus $15. So now, again, our enemy is roster spots. We have $39 left, and we have 5 roster spots. So we're looking for the strongest possible combination of 5 players that are left, or the most expensive 5 players. We probably go Austin Reeves here because I think he's just going to have a lot of value. I'm tempted to go Michael Porter Jr. And this is the hard part, guys. And this is why I will say I'm going to give myself early here like an A-, but it's not going to be the best possible version of this build. And the reason why it's not going to be the best possible version of the build is there's going to be guys like Ben Simmons, Draymond Green, Herb Jones, Kevon Looney. There's going to be a lot of guys that we don't have roster spots for. All right, let's talk about our team and give the ratings. I'm looking at my roster. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that I'm giving myself a B+. Why am I giving myself a B+ and not an A? I think I made some small mistakes. One of those is I should have gotten a second star earlier when I saw that the prices were a little bit too low and that there was too much money being spent. I'm going to give myself not a hard grade because there was some computer players in here. I think if I was able to get this type of roster on draft day and a cash draft against all humans, I'd be pretty happy with it. Let's talk about what happened. I stayed on the plan, and I went Nikola Jokic, who's the best player in fantasy basketball. Nick Claxton was a pivotal moment someone who I don't think is good at fantasy basketball, bid him up to $30 and we let him go. We were able to get Rudy Gobert, Jakob Poeltl, and Mitch Robinson as our anchor bigs. These are very, very good bigs. If anything, we're a little light on big men. Like, this build tends to get more big men. We made the decision to go for just total talent because of how much cash we had, and we purchased C.J. McCollum, Tyus Jones, Austin Reeves, and Michael Porter Jr. Now, even though we're a pump points team, we're probably going to be better than 4 or 5 teams in points because of how much scoring we got late. The plan would be to trade Michael Porter Jr., most likely Austin Reeves, most likely C.J. McCollum, and probably Trey Murphy. We grabbed Trey Murphy late because you can put him on the injured reserve list, and there's going to be 4 or 5 players that go undrafted that fit our build really well. So let's talk about overall talent. Let's look at the standings. Based on last year's play, we ended up being tied for the 3rd best team. This is really good because our build, anytime you do a hard punt, you end up being lower on the player rater. We ended up being the 2nd best field goal percentage team. We ended up being better than 2 teams in free throw. Really bad at threes. Really bad at points. When it was all rounded out, we ended up being the worst points team still, but remember, we're going to be trading our scores for value later. Number 1 rebounds, top 5 in assists, number 2 in steals, top 5-ish, top 6 in blocks, and top 4 in turnovers. Rounding us out again to tied for 3rd. So I'm going to grade this the weirdest draft that I've had with pump points, but we're still fine. We're easily going to make the playoffs with this roster, and we have a lot of trade capital. So this is a safe draft. Weird stuff happened. I already gave you some recommendations. Let's talk about Jake's team.
Yeah, my team, honestly, I think it's because of what I got Halliburton for, but I don't think I could be happier with this centerless build. I went pure centerless here, didn't even draft one. My scoring ends up being really good, even with Herb Jones, just because all my guys are just. We can look through the stats here. So
Yeah, I'm pulling it
ended
up
up
right now.
being the second worst field goal percentage team.
I'll go through it because I have the screen share, so
All right, you got it.
Show them. You ended up being the 2nd worst field goal percentage team, actually tied for it. You're the number 2 free throw percentage team, the number 1 3-point team, and you over-concentrated it a little bit, maybe, by 5. You're the highest.
Okay with that?
Second highest scoring team,
Yeah, but look
basically
at the
tied.
difference in points. That's tied.
Yeah, basically tied. You are the worst rebounding team, but that was by design. You're the 3rd best assist team, and
But maybe
very
second.
close to second. Very
Yeah.
close to second. And you're the number 1 steals team, making my steals look better by comparison because of how much you dominated steals. And you're the worst blocks team, again, by design. And you are the 3rd best team. 3rd best team in terms of turnovers. That's probably the most impressive one, that your assist to turnover ratio was so strong all the way through. So 3rd best turnovers, 3rd best assists. That's a lot of weeks of beating teams in both categories.
Yeah, I think this team is going to beat most teams 6-3. There are going to be some teams that are just low turnover teams that I'll beat 5-4. But yeah, I think this team is incredibly solid. I love this build because it goes so deep that you get guys like Dinwiddie, Herter, Mike Conley, Gary Trent late in drafts who play like top 40, top 50 players in your build. I just can't stress enough how much I love this build. I've never played it before in a league, so I don't know what it's going to look like throughout the year with streaming and positional eligibility and all that. But I did end up with 2 players, right? 2 players who are power forward eligible and a whole bunch of guys who are small forward eligible. So I'm not worried about that. I think the thing I'm most worried about is the assists. I think that even with Halliburton, it's just a little bit light on assists, but I think the late round guys made up for it. And yeah, this team's also really fun. I imagine, I've never played this build, but I think it's fun because you're gonna have these massive scoring games with Kyrie and Jamal Murray and Zach LaVine and Tyrese Maxey and Klay Thompson. You're gonna have some crazy 3-point shooting weeks, and those are always really fun to see.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. We love you. Don't forget to crush your friends and drink the souls of your enemies. Fantasy Trash Talk out.